Okay, let's dive deeper into the idea of intrinsic motivation. Now, as I mentioned before, intrinsic motivation is from your internal processes, thoughts, and history. Yep, all of that goes into what motivates you and why it's either a strong motivation or maybe not. Intrinsic just means that you do something because you want to, because it's interesting or just satisfying. It means you're doing it for what you're doing and not for any other reason. And this intrinsic motivation grows and deepens along with us as we mature. In other words, the motivation may be the same to learn to write and then to learn how to write. We want to get our thoughts across. We want to be able to communicate in this cool way, but once you have a sense of your mastery about writing, you become more interested in how to use your skill in writing to really craft your message. Get it across with some oomph, you might say. Now, this might lead you to believe that flow and intrinsic motivation are the same. They're pretty closely related, but they're not the same. Flow, which was articulated in 1990 by a scientist whose name is in the notes because, despite my bestest efforts, I couldn't seem to pronounce it in any way that didn't make me kind of wince at the possibility that the scientist would hear it. So it's there. Anyway, flow is that wonderful state when you're completely absorbed in what it is that you're doing. When the enjoyment and the progress feel natural and connected to each other. And just like with intrinsic motivation, this all comes from an internal to yourself and internal to the activity itself. Just like with intrinsic motivation, this all comes from internal to yourself and inherent in the activity itself. Ever notice how some musicians don't even seem to be connected to the fact that they're playing for thousands of people? But their connection to the music, well, that is really evident. Daniel Pink did a great book called Drive that makes the point that not all activities have to be intrinsically motivated. Apparently, loads of studies and work have come to the conclusion that if the thing that you want someone to do is fairly basic, pretty well documented processes and all, the traditional carrot stick kind of external motivation works just fine. Unfortunately, there aren't really a lot of places in the world as it is today, and the world it's rapidly becoming, where boatloads of the tasks meet that description. And it's not a great recipe for engagement. And in the middle of all of the angst created by the quiet quitting, and where do they get these phrases? As quiet quitting, as it's being called now, the last thing you want to do is build a team culture that suggests that there's no need for creativity, initiative, or purpose. As a matter of fact, Pinkett points out three specific elements of strong intrinsic motivation for teams at work are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These elements, though, they're going to work differently for different people. And there is another thing. Sometimes intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are actually pretty tightly interwoven. Now, for example, would you think that if you started paying someone to do something that they normally have a strong intrinsic motivation to do, that they would actually deliver less or, or worse? Me either. That was definitely not my first thought. But it turns out that it's true. Just goes to show many of the things that we think should be a logical flow aren't. So Ultimately, you know what? This is one really good reason why it's so important to know how your team members are motivated. We'll address the whole money thing in a later video, but right now, I want you to think about this. If you think that you have to provide money rather than autonomy, the opportunity for creativity or mastery, well, it would be a really good idea to know who that would motivate and who might lose motivation, literally, just as a result of the offer. As I said, we'll be talking about money in one of the other video lessons on the subject of motivation. This one was really interesting, and the next one you'll see is on extrinsic motivation. These videos are brought to you by the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy. I'm Kimi Hirotsu Zemsky, and thanks for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.